Before I offer whatever few words I have this evening, I just want to acknowledge, friends, that it's been a really difficult week. And I have to tell you that when I was planning about what I was going to speak about tonight, I started and then abandoned about 3 separate sermons. I often think that the times when it's hardest to figure out what to say tend to be the times when it's most important to have something to say. And I will also begin with the acknowledgement that my heart has been hurting for the last couple of weeks, and I know that many of yours have been hurting as well. And when times are hard and when our hearts hurt, even if we can't figure out immediately what the right words are, sometimes it's just good to be together and to spend time shoulder to shoulder like we are tonight, immersing ourselves in prayer and in song and in the words of Torah that have always provided comfort to our people. This week, as I mentioned earlier, we return to the story of Noah and the ark, which I'm sure many of us remember from Sunday school or maybe from preschool. It is, we must acknowledge, kind of a weird story to teach to preschoolers. It's about a turbulent and destructive flood that inundates the entire planet, the unimaginable, massive, global extinction event, extinguishing life and growth and promise on a planetary scale. While the waters rage, Noah and his family are sealed in the ark, safely cloistered away as the rest of creation drowns slowly in the floodwaters beneath them. It's kind of a weird story to teach our kids. I'll say, though, that as we return to it this year, this time around, it's a story I find myself relating to in a very new, grown-up kind of way. The uncertainty and the fear and the growing awareness that we are experiencing something unlike anything we've gone through in a very, very long time, if ever before. Maybe you feel like you can relate to parts of this story this year too, where the water's rising and rising around us. No one knows how long it will last or what the world will look like when we get out. And so we hold on to each other and we pray to stay afloat. I always found it interesting that after all the detail the Torah provides about the ark, the animals, the rainfall, the rise and fall of the mighty flood, after all of that rich, descriptive prose in the story, one thing we never hear, not at all, is a single word from Noah. In all of chapter 6, chapter 7, chapter 8, nearly all of chapter 9 of Genesis, Noah doesn't say one single thing. Not one sentence, one phrase, not a single word in that entire dramatic, tragic tale. Noah is completely, bafflingly silent. How could that be? How could the Torah have written Noah's role as a non-speaking part? He experienced fear and devastation that no one in history had ever gone through before. He confronted the possibility that his entire species would come to an end at any given moment, and yet, not a word. Imagine what that time on the ark must have been like. If we follow the biblical timeline, it was more than a year that Noah and his family were in there. Surely they must have talked about something. What did they talk about? Wouldn't we love to know? Did they fight? Did they cry? Did Noah's wife and children thank him for all the preparations he had made to keep them safe, to shelter them away from death and destruction? Did they blame him for not having made more of an effort to talk God out of this terrible plan? We don't know. Throughout the whole entire story, when God chooses Noah, when Noah builds the ark, when the rain falls, when the flood subsides, when Noah finally emerges and sees the entire planet utterly barren and unrecognizable, he says nothing. The therapists in the room might tell us that Noah was paralyzed and muted by shock and trauma. Maybe he kept his silence because he was experiencing some kind of survivor's guilt, filled with shame about the fact that although he and his family remained safe, he never tried to save anyone else by secretly smuggling them into the ark with his family. Maybe Noah allowed himself the shameful thought that those who died deserved it, and he didn't dare to speak it aloud. I don't blame him for not opening his mouth. It's hard to figure out what to say when the waters are raging all around you. Like I said, many of us are probably feeling that way tonight. Maybe we don't know what to say. Maybe we don't have anyone to talk to. Some of us, I know, are feeling distant from our non-Jewish friends and families. Some of us even feeling that way, estranged from our loved ones who are Jewish but who have different feelings than we do these days. It's hard because all these intense feelings that we're feeling in different mixtures and proportions, they don't just disappear. Any of us who work with people that are going through traumatic grief or loss know this. Painful feelings don't just go away. If we're smart, we can channel them into directions that are productive, into meaningful, honest conversation, or into acts of service or tzedakah. Some people do art, some people exercise, some people pray. But if we're not mindful about how we handle our feelings, all these pointed words that go unspoken may be transformed into fuel for the machinery of vindictiveness and spite. So when is the first time Noah opens his mouth? The first time the Torah tells us that Noah speaks is after that year on the ark. The flood is ended, the waters receded, the earth is tranquil and dry. Noah comes out of the ark, goes into his tent to get undressed. And his youngest son catches a glimpse of him and rushes out to his brothers to gossip about having seen their father in a moment of immodesty. When Noah hears about this, he flies into a rage. That relatively minor incident of thoughtless immaturity lights a fuse in him that ignites an explosive fit of anger and vengefulness. And so the first time Noah opens his mouth in our story is to place a curse on his son. He says out loud his wish that the boy will be doomed to live the rest of his life as Eved Avadim, a slave to slaves, cursed to live the rest of his life in servitude and degradation. That part of the story about how Noah finally breaks his silence feels like a warning to the rest of us who are living through the trauma of these days. And it's an encouragement for us to think now about who we can talk to, what we can do with the anger and fear inside, where we can put it, how we can start to dismantle all that anxious energy that's generated inside ourselves when we worry about our kids, our institutions, our homeland in Israel. These are potent feelings, and we need to be thoughtful about what to do with them. Fortunately, those of us in Houston live in a Jewish community that has abundant resources for mental health and emotional wellness, and I hope that all of us will feel free and encouraged to use them. We have to be so careful, so cautious that grief and heartbreak that we're feeling won't propel us toward words and actions that are unbecoming of a holy nation. I hope that we'll find a way to harness that fire and use it for noble purposes, giving tzedakah, volunteering, writing letters to our elected officials and to our friends and family in Israel, because the world is watching us, and we have to get this right. As for our friend Noah, he finally calms down, and eventually he gets it right too. Remembering that God expects him to work to rebuild a better world, he sets the task of ethical rebalancing, of recentering the world in kindness and justice. God shows him the sign of the rainbow, the visible promise of an enduring covenant, and Noah gathers stones for an altar where he and his family can bring offerings as a sign of their faithfulness. And then Noah falls back into silence again. The Torah tells us that Noah continued to live for a very long time after all this. He lived more than a third of his life's years in the time after the flood ended. And again, we don't know anything about what he did or what he said in the years that followed. Did everything he had seen haunt him for the rest of his days? Was he consumed with the intensity of trauma and grief? Did he seek reconciliation with his son? Or were his family relationships poisoned forever by the weight of the tragedy and loss he lived through? We just don't know. But after Noah, the world goes limping on imperfectly. Long after the Garden of Eden has become a distant memory, human civilization just does its best to go on, muddling through progress and provocation, suffering and solace, incomprehensible pain on a verdant, fertile earth. The one reliable truth is God's promise. What has been rebuilt will never again be destroyed. God keeps that promise, and to his credit, the inscrutably silent Noah does too. He made every effort to ensure that the world that would live after him would be one that would not permit wickedness and violence to reign. And we today are the descendants of that long ago flood, and it's now our turn to do our work and use our words as well to tend to the world's potential as a place where people can remain safe, where we shelter those who are innocent and call to account those who are not, where all of God's children can stand under the sheltering ark of a covenant that promises goodness and justice for all who will participate in it. So as we make our way into this mysterious, strange, and uncertain Shabbat, let us remain side by side to use our presence, our deeds, and our words to make this world remain a place of goodness and mercy and peace. Shabbat shalom, everybody. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.